A newspaper is supposed to tell you who, what, when, where, and how. An intelligence organization is supposed to tell you that, but more important, tell you why and what next. And that's really where STRATFOR differs from a journalistic organization. A journalistic organization is essentially backward-looking. Its job is to record what has happened and to tell the reader all about it. An intelligence organization is supposed to really be focused on what's going to happen. And that's a very different task. Another way to look at it is that a journalistic organization is source-based. It tells you what people tell it. In intelligence, or at least at STRATFOR intelligence, we're very suspicious of sources, not because they're liars, but because they're going to tell you what they want you to know. And we're really interested in those things that are real in the world that have no sources. I mean, one of the facts of the matter is that there are huge amounts of things happening in the world that there is no person to step forward and tell you about. So, whereas a newspaper will never revert to inference, STRATFOR will. I'll give you an example. When the war in Georgia broke out in 2008, STRATFOR had predicted that that was going to happen. It was not that we'd penetrated the Russian government or the Georgian government, although we had sources in both. It was the realization that the Russians had been put in a position by a decision to give Kosovo independence that gave them no choice. So whereas a newspaper would never infer what is likely to happen as a result, or shouldn't infer, we do. We don't simply connect the dots, we try to fill in the blank spaces. And sometimes that requires sources, and sometimes that requires a tremendous amount of research, and sometimes that requires logic and inference. And that makes us very different from a journalistic organization. What we try to do is tell the story of the relationship between nations, and to try to tell the story of how various nations may decide to act the way they do. That's the heart of what we do, and we leave other aspects of the news to other people. We're much less interested in the decisions that people make than the decisions they're going to have to make. So we're not really all that interested in what the bureaucrats and officials inside of Washington have to say, because they come and go and it really doesn't matter. Washington has an entire industry of producing policy papers, most of which are never read by anyone of importance. And those people who are really important, like the president, they don't really get to make as many decisions as you might think. The pressures that are on a president, that are squeezing them, shaping them, and forming them, are just much more important than what he might want to do. And what we focus on are those pressures and not the people. Intelligence allows the individual the same thing as it allows governments, the opportunity to plan ahead. If you don't know it's coming, there's nothing you can do. But for example, if you understood that George Bush had decided to finance the war of Iraq by borrowing instead of by paying for it directly, I think you would have understood that there were going to be certain economic consequences. And if you understood those consequences, you may have been able to plan around it. So intelligence allows you to plan your own lives, because whether the individual knows it or not, his life is a product of all the forces around him.